What's the meanest comment you've ever gotten on YouTube?
Um, I've been dumb fuck Dan is one that I remember that just makes me laugh.
100% of the proceeds gained from this monetized episode will be donated to sciencesaves.org. Thanks for listening.
What's the meanest comment you've ever gotten?
This one time I got a comment that it was on a set that I did and that I posted, and this person said, because oddly enough, when I post these videos, I never get mean comments. This is the nicest experience I've ever had on the internet, is this podcast. But when I
Interesting.
post like stand up, that's when I just get ripped to shreds. And this
Sure,
one woman was
sure.
like, what did men have to pay you to become such a Judas goat? And I was like,
Whoa.
what's a Judas goat? Because it was like capitalized, there was like a hyphen, and YouTube, that's like not normal. And I
Yeah.
was like, what does that mean? And I Googled it. And a Judas goat is the goat that they use at the slaughterhouse. They feed it, they play with it, they give it treats so that it's happy. And it happily leads all the animals who trust it, because it's happy and it's pleasant and it's having a great time. It leads all the animals into the slaughter. And it just does this like on a rotation all day, every
Oh,
day. It's like a
wow.
spoiled goat that like tricks everyone else to go to their death.
Wow, that's like a weird,
It was
almost like a
heavy.
literary
It was
reference
heavy.
there.
I was like, "Damn." I had to think about that for a
That's
second.
crazy.
Um, so let's just go ahead and get started.
Yeah, you can do your intro bit, I'll be quiet.
Perfect.
We'll
Yeah.
we get ready
No.
to go.
um, Objectively Dan, thank you so
Yes.
much for being a guest on my podcast. I'm super stoked to have you on. You come very highly recommended, and I was introduced to your work actually by people who follow me, my Discord, YouTube, and I think maybe Reddit also, all threw your name out there when I was asking for who they would like to see as guests, and then I checked out your content, and I really liked it. So thank you for taking time out of your day to be on the podcast. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
thank you so much for inviting me, Sydney. I'll be honest with you, I'm a freak for being on podcasts. When
Yeah.
people invite me, there's a good chance I'll just be on. Like, I'm one of those people, I just like being at places. It's almost FOMO. It's like, if you send me one, even if it's like your show gets 10 views, I'll do it. I
Yep.
don't know why. I just enjoy the grind, the hustle. I don't know
Yeah.
what you call it. It's fun for me.
Yeah. Hey,
But
I'm
your
here
show
for
is
it.
is a great show, by the way. I had not seen your stuff before, but when you had invited me on, I got to listen to your stuff, and I'm happy to be on. You've talked to some friends of mine in the past, so I'm excited to be a part of the canon of growing up Fundie. You
The
know,
Nick Cannon of Grown Up
the
Fundie.
Nick Cannon of growing up Fundie. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that being said, tell us from your perspective a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? What are you about
Yeah.
other than being on everybody's podcast?
Other than that, I'm Objectively Dan. In case you're wondering why I'm Objectively Dan, it's just a funny name. It doesn't it Some people think, "Oh, you're Objective Dan. That must mean." No, I'm not objective. Okay, I'm Objectively Dan. It actually came from, there's a long story attached to it, but long story short, I went to an apologist's sort of show. I don't know, it's not really a show. What do you call it? Seminar, I guess. And I asked them about objective morality, and I thought that their answer to objective morality was so silly that I might as well just call myself Objectively Dan, and it might as well mean the same thing. So there's kind of like a weird meta thing to it there. But no, I'm Objectively Dan. I've been going by this name for 5 years now, 6 years now. I've been on the internet. So I am probably most known for hosting a live call-in show called Truth Wanted, which I've got in the background here for those of you watching on YouTube. It is a call-in show that I do with an organization called the Atheist Community of Austin. And every single week I have new guests, and we have live calls where we talk to people about what they believe and why. Most recently, we had all flat earthers call in, and we talked to some of those. It was great. I've talked to Scientologists. I've talked to UFO cult folks. I've talked to Christians. I've talked to atheists. I talked to people of all kinds of beliefs and backgrounds, and it's very, very fun. I'm also occasionally I'm also a host on another show called Talk Heathen, that I don't produce for, but I do produce for Truth Wanted, and then I also occasionally make appearances on Atheist Experience as well. I was just
which
on
is so
there
cool.
2 weeks ago. That was really fun. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place, and then I make podcast visits on Growing Up Fundie
Yes.
at least once.
Yep.
So here I am. Yeah,
Here
and
you
it's
are.
been great. Yeah, yeah.
It's been a wonderful hour and a half since we've known each
Yeah,
other, but the audience is just meeting us.
you're right.
Um, so in reading about you and in reading about your beliefs, I actually learned an entirely new word, which
Mm,
I want to give
mhm.
you credit for teaching me, and it is the word ichtheist.
Yes,
So
yes.
tell us about it.
So this is a comment that I get from other people where, "Oh, I've taught you this word." It's like, great, because I learned this word, I mean, fairly recently. I'd say I'd started using this to describe myself in the past maybe 2 years now. So broadly speaking, I am an atheist, and what I mean by atheist is I lack a belief in
Mhm.
God. So, of course, there's a lot of people that find that definition very contentious, right? Because they
Right.
say, well, if you look at the philosophical literature, okay, that just means you're describing a psychological state. You're not actually talking about a proposition. The proposition of atheism is supposed to be God does not exist, period, right? And so there's contention in the community, and you've probably talked about this before on the show, of like what that word atheist means. So I've kind of found a back door to that, and I use this
Okay.
term atheist. And what
Okay.
atheist means is I don't know what God is until you tell me. Okay, so
Mm.
when we talk about God, we usually mean the Christian God. We usually mean
Right.
Yahweh. It's a
Right.
very specific Western perspective that is not shared universally amongst all of humankind. And when you talk about God in the modern day in the United States, that's what a lot of people mean, but that is not always what people meant when they say God. In fact, God even today is still very nebulous amongst people. There's some people that say God
Right.
is nature. Okay, well, if God is nature, I believe in nature.
Right.
Right? I think nature is real. So does that make me not an atheist? Well, okay, so we have this problem, and this problem is, what is God? Well, I don't know until you tell me, right?
Right.
So an atheist is just someone who says, I don't even until we coherently define what God even is, I can't say whether I believe in it or not.
Yeah.
I probably don't.
Yeah.
My
No matter
most
what it is, I'm pretty sure that I don't, but I'm
most I
open.
don't, but again, like if you're talking about God concepts that I can get behind, like nature's a big one that comes up, God is just the self. Okay, I believe in myself, right?
Right.
Like, then that works. But I use that atheist label for two reasons. One, because it gets around that whole atheist debate,
Right.
which is very annoying, and I don't like having semantic debates on that.
Right.
And two,
Right.
because it's kind of cool, and then people can be like, "Oh wow, you taught me a new word," and be like, "Oh, thanks. That makes me feel good and smart."
Good. Good.
There you go.
That's awesome. I
This
had no
word
idea
I
that
found, like,
so
2 years ago. Yeah,
well,
yeah,
and I feel better that I'm not the only one that says that, because every time I
yeah.
discover something new, I feel like I'm not a good enough, like, atheist podcaster for not knowing those things, you know? It's like when I hear
No,
about
it's
a new comedy club and people are like, "You've never heard of it?" And I'm like, "Well, I guess fucking not."
yeah.
Like, I guess not. Like, I don't know, it's like, I'm sorry. But you have not always been an atheist, from
No,
what I
in
understand.
fact, I grew up Fundie. Actually, well, Fundie adjacent, I would
That's what
say.
I said. I say Fundy
Yeah,
adjacent. I've never heard
yeah.
anyone else say that.
It's debatable how fundamentalist I was because I was not a young earth creationist,
Right.
but I was a staunch Christian. I grew up in Waco, Texas,
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
Waco,
Oh, yeah.
Texas is known for 2 things. A guy who led a cult in the '90s and HGTV shows about reconstructing houses. Those are the 2
Which
things
is
Waco
arguably
is
another
known for.
cult, I would
Yeah,
say.
which is well, we might get to that. But, you know, I'd rather be known for the HGTV stuff than the cult stuff, but when I
Right.
tell people from Waco, for most of my life, that's what they say. Now they're like, "Oh, that's where Pip and Joanne are at." And it's like, "Okay, yeah, that's there too." But, yeah, so I grew up in Waco, very religious place, right?
Right.
Like middle of the Bible Belt, okay?
Right.
So my upbringing's kinda weird because my dad used to be Catholic, but by the time he married my mom, was with him, they went to a Methodist church together. So I grew up in a Methodist
Interesting.
church, but my mother grew up Episcopalian. So
Interesting. So why
yeah,
did they settle on Methodist? Why was that like
so
a good middle road?
I have some theories. My dad has never I've asked him this directly, and he's never directly told me. my dad was previously married, and I think, and this was when he was in college. He was only married for like a year. You're not supposed to get divorced in the Catholic
No.
system.
Did he have to, like, write a letter to the Pope?
No, I don't know what he did, but he got divorced, and, I think that may have played a role because
Yeah.
he's not supposed to do that.
Nope.
Also, I think he's more of a deist now than he used to be, which is interesting. I think he has a
Hmm.
more free-form concept of God, and I think, like, a Protestant version of religion kind of lends more, credence to that because, Catholicism, you have to follow the catechism, right, or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's sets beliefs that are very strict and not really
Yep.
open to interpretation, whereas
Right.
Protestant beliefs, you can kinda do what you want.
You can do
We can
whatever the
kinda
fuck
just
you
start a
want.
new one tomorrow, and it's all good.
Yep.
So I think that lend and the Methodist Church is kind of like Catholic light in some sense.
Literally.
They got
Yep.
bishops and stuff. So there's some weird thing. So
Yep.
so I grew up first 12 years of my life Methodist, and then we started going to a Baptist church in my teenage years.
I was gonna say, were you Baptist too at one point?
Yes, because, my Boy Scout troop was so and so we just started going there. So, like, I just grew up with all these kind of different weird influences, and I didn't know the difference between them.
Right.
I was like 12, I don't know, but I did do
Right.
confirmation classes when I was a Methodist, so I did that. I was baptized as a baby in the Methodist church, which is a thing you can do, but then, I also did the confirmation classes and was baptized again. And confirmation, for those of you who don't know, is just, a class that you can kind of take that basically says, "Okay, but, like, are you sure you're a Christian, though? And, like, do you know what that means?" And so,
Yeah.
like, they kinda teach you that. Um, so, yeah, I dedicated my life to Christ at the age of 12, and then I started going to a Baptist church, so that was really fun. But, yeah, I was very involved in the youth group. I did that, and then eventually I got to college, and I was, also a part of an evangelical college ministry called, Campus Crusade. They're now called Cru. They were called Cru when I was there, but a lot of people know them as Campus Crusade. So I've
Jesus.
I've been in some circles, you know
Yeah,
what I
and
mean? Been in some places.
which one, like, vibed with you the most until none of them did?
Honestly, I think the Methodist Church is the one I miss the most.
Methodists are, like, the low-key cool religious people. All
Now,
the
you
cool
say
people went to
that,
the Methodist
there
church.
there's a lot of conservative Methodists out there as well. You gotta remember that the Methodist Church proper, at least because of their prominent rise in Africa, does not accept gay marriage as a legitimate thing. They've made a decision on that recently, so that's the whole thing that's
But
happening.
when you think about conservative Methodists versus
Yeah.
conservative Baptists.
Yeah, no, I'll take that 7 days a week. You're
Right,
absolutely right. And so
right.
I think that was the influence there. I think I grew up with a at least the first 12 years of my life, a very Jesus is about love kind of
Yes.
relationship with Christianity,
Mhm,
and I think that influenced me. I think that was a good thing.
mhm.
I'm glad that I have that part of myself.
Right, right.
I think actually as I got older and I started to understand the differences between these denominations and also meet other Christians where I kinda realized, "Oh, this kinda has some issues here."
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
I didn't have that literalist belief of the Bible either.
Right.
That's another thing that isn't as emphasized as much, at least in the Methodist church that I went to, that they were
That's more
okay
of, like,
with
a
saying
fundamentalist Christian thing.
yes, and so that's why I say fundamentalist adjacent because I grew up around fundamentalists in Waco for sure, but, like, I had a girlfriend in high school who, would argue with me, and it was a really big deal that I didn't believe that the Earth was, like, 6,000 years old. Like, that was a big deal for her.
Yes. Yes.
And, I didn't have that, but I did believe in God. I did believe that Jesus was magic, that Jesus did miracles and did all these things, right? And, was a good person, and I thought I had the Holy Spirit in me. So, it's kinda complicated. Really, like, Christianity is very complicated when you get
It
down to the
is.
brass tacks,
It
you
is,
know?
and a lot of
Yeah.
times first of all, can you hear my dog snoring? Is that obnoxiously
No,
loud?
but
Okay.
n but why would you not wanna hear that? That sounds
It
great.
sounds like I have a six-foot man in this room, like, snoring on my floor. I just didn't want you to think I had somebody held
I
hostage.
I can't hear anything,
Good,
and the authorities
it's
can't
worse.
prove anything, so
True, you can't
I
see
keep
her
it at
or
that.
him,
Yeah.
whoever.
Mhm.
Um, but have you noticed especially in American Christianity, I can't speak for other countries and religions, it's almost worse to be the wrong kind of Christian than to not be a Christian at all,
Oh,
because I
yes.
feel like they think if you're an atheist or if you're just a heathen, they can fix you. They can bring you to the light. They can bring you to
100%.
Awanas enough
Listen.
times and like you're
Oh,
savable.
yeah. Oh, we need to talk about Awanas, by the way. I heard on your podcast. Okay, I listened to the show.
Yes. Yes.
You said, and I quote, "I don't know anybody every time I mention Awanas that knows what I'm talking about. Sydney, I know what you're talking about. I knew about the Awanas, okay?
I
I wasn't a
knew
part of it,
I knew
but
we
I
were
knew."
kindred spirits. Kindred
Yes.
spirits.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so,
Did you ever earn any of the badges?
no, I said like I said, I didn't do it, but I
Okay.
knew about
But
it.
you know what I'm talking about.
I was in Boy Scouts, though, and
Yeah,
that's a
close enough.
Christian organization. A lot of people don't realize that.
I didn't realize that. It doesn't surprise me at all, but
It
I
is
didn't realize that.
I'm an Eagle Scout, and, uh,
Okay.
when you when you do your board of review, which is basically when they decide, do you get to be an Eagle Scout, they ask you what your relationship with God is like, and they ask you these questions about your faith and stuff, so, yeah, I don't know if they do that anymore,
You're just like,
but
"Yeah,
that
I
was the
fuck
thing.
with him."
Yeah, that's my boy,
Yeah.
JC.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, wait, where are we
We
what
were
were we
talking about
talking about
how
again?
it's worse to be the wrong kind of
You're right.
Christian
Yes,
than
because
not a Christian at all.
I was gonna say Baptists talk the most shit, okay? I heard the most things. I heard them talk bad about Mormons, I heard them talk
Yep.
bad about Pentecostals,
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I heard them talk bad
Pentecostals are
about
crazy.
Methodists too,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
was
yeah. Baptists love talking bad about Baptists. Are you kidding? That's like the tea.
yeah,
That's like what we talk about. That's how we communicate.
that was interesting. I do remember that experience and kinda thinking like, "Huh." So there is like a right Christianity and a wrong Christianity. They always talk about well, 2 things. One, like, you could be in the wrong you really could be in the wrong faith. You may not be following God the right way,
Right?
and, like, you may think that you can call yourself a Christian, but you may not actually be a Christian. That was a heavily emphasized point as well, and to this day, and I'm sure you get this too, Sydney, there are people who say, "Well, you were never a real Christian, because if you were a real Christian, you would have never left the faith." Haha, what
You
a,
couldn't hack it. You couldn't
yeah.
hack it as a real Christian. Yep.
Exactly, exactly, and that's what a
Wild.
catch-22 that is, but,
Yeah. So you were
mm,
Methodist and
yeah,
Baptist and then briefly
Baptist
evangelical. And so
briefly.
how and you were also in, a street epistemology video with Anthony
Yes,
Magnabosco, who I've also had
yes,
as a guest,
yes,
and which was wild. Like, now that I've
mm,
met you, it's, like, wild. It doesn't even seem like the same person. Um,
yeah,
so then how does one go from that person to who you are today? Like, what
yeah.
was, like, the first step where you were like,
Well,
"This isn't necessarily for me
let
anymore?"
let's talk about that video for folks who don't know. If you watch the episode with Anthony Magnabosco with Sydney, you probably should. Anthony's a great guy. Anthony is a proponent of this methodology called street epistemology, which is a method of talking to people about their beliefs. And it's not a debate format. It's a way of asking people questions,
Mhm.
so that you can genuinely know how to be informed about their beliefs. It's not to give you ammo so that you can give good counter arguments. It's a way for people to critically think about their own beliefs
Right.
and provide a reflection. You're giving them a mirror.
Right,
So
which I think is so much more successful than debate.
yes, I think so too, and it's something that I advocate a lot on my show, but, I was a quote unquote "victim" of Anthony Magnabosco. When I was in college, Anthony came to my campus, and I spoke to him, and I was actually in that video, you can see I was, like, on my way to a crew meeting, or we had a crew meeting later that day. My friends are with me, and so I'm 19 years old in this video, and, I had a conversation with Anthony. It was about 30 minutes long. It's on YouTube, and you can watch it.
Can I link
Um
it in the
yeah,
description? Yeah,
absolutely,
I'll link
yeah,
it. Yeah.
and so, like, I it's weird looking at that video because 'cause you're right, 'cause I'm a completely different person. I'm very much a Christian, and I talk about my beliefs, and a lot of people think, "Oh, well, this is the moment where you became an atheist," and that's not true. I I it was a stepping stone in my deconstruction process. Because in the video, I actually say I'm 100% confident in, God being real, and that was a lie,
I was gonna say
and
that's how you know you're deconstructing is when you're like, "I'm 100%
yes.
sure that Christ is real," because 'cause you're like, "I'm not sure. I don't know, but you
And
can't know this."
I've said this in other interviews, I'm saying this here, that was a lie, okay? And looking back on that, Why did I lie? Because in Christianity, and specifically the circles, especially in evangelical circles, there's a pressure to be 100% certain. Because if you're not
Yep.
100% certain, in some contexts, that could be a sin to have doubt. For some people, that's the thing. The other thing is too, you have to be certain because your soul is is up for debate as to
Yep.
whether or not you get to hang out with the big man upstairs.
Yep.
So, like, there is this sort of um pressure to say things even if you don't mean it, right? And that doesn't just go for a God belief. That can also be like miracles and stuff too. There's a lot of miracle stories that get shown around or and talked about, and you just kind of have to be like, oh wow, this is true, because like testimony is also this other kind of component where you always want to have like a cool, interesting testimony story, because like you hear about this friend who got healed in South America or something, and you're just like, oh, my parents were Christian, and I'm a Christian, and that's why.
Yep.
So, there's these kind of, background sort of forces that are at work there. But yeah, no, I was on a stepping stone. That was a stepping stone in my path because, um, I got to talk to somebody about what it meant to be an atheist, but also what my beliefs really were, and nobody had ever done that to me before.
Right, and he
None of
wasn't arguing with you, he was
No.
legitimately asking you.
He was legitimately asking me. And by the way, that's the first time also I got to read comments of myself. We were talking before the show about hate comments. I saw people calling me stupid in the comments. Like, 'cause I watched the video later.
Yeah.
I People call me stupid, saying it was dumb. Some people said I would be an atheist later, which is hilarious. And uh, and I saw that, but like nobody had ever done that to me. And like it's so funny because I was supposed to be out there, like, preaching the gospel and, like, literally harassing people and, like, telling people, and I always felt a little bit uncomfortable about it,
Yeah.
but I thought it was the right thing to do. Like, you talk to people about this whole Jesus thing and this truth, and nobody had ever sat down and talked to me about what I thought for
Right.
that long and that extensively, and that is
Right.
why partly why I'm such a big advocate for street epistemology, is because you're giving people a gift
You are.
if you do this thing right, and it's not for you, it's for them. It really is. It's a gift. Like people can take that, put a pebble in their shoe, and really reflect and think about things that they would never have the opportunity to do otherwise, because you're
Right?
giving them the time of day. So Anthony gave me that gift that day by having that conversation with me, but it was a stepping stone in my deconstruction process. I didn't call myself an atheist for another year or two. And before that, I was like a liberal Christian. I called myself a Christian mystic at one point, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there. So yeah, a lot of stuff there. How did I get from there to here? It was a journey, but it started before that, I think, with really thinking about what this whole God thing means and why do I believe it. And part of that was this idea of faith. And what does faith mean? To me, it was trusting things that weren't there. And
Right.
why do I do that?
Right.
Why do this and
Right.
not with other things? So,
Yeah, and
big topic.
atheism
Yeah.
and deconstruction, whether they
Mhm.
wind up atheist or not,
Yeah.
deconstruction is such an important thing that I say you, I say we,
Yeah.
everybody has to let people do on their own.
100%.
Because, for example, I dated someone who was an atheist, and the entire time we were together for 3 years, the entire time we dated, he was one of those, like, loud, militant, like,
Mm.
2007 atheists,
Oh,
that,
yeah.
like,
I
came
know
out
the
of the
type.
right. And that forced me so far back into the Christian closet because every day
Mm.
I was being like in my own home, I had to argue, I had to debate, I had to defend myself, I had to this, I had to that, I had to hear about how stupid it was, I had to hear about how wrong it was, I had to deal with like the sarcastic smirks and stuff constantly. And and I know that that person probably, if they even know about this channel at all, probably thinks like, oh, I'm the one that introduced her, when in reality he did so much damage by trying to force the issue. And these argumentative debate atheist
Mhm.
channels that are all about
Yes.
like so and so destroying so and so, and they have the thumbnail that's like really
Yep.
aggressive or whatever, they
Yep.
do so much damage because
Yes.
like anything else, it has to be on that person's time with that
Yes.
person's level of comfort in a
Yes.
place where, like, as much as liberals get shit on for saying this, in a space they feel safe and they feel
Yes.
welcome and they feel invited. You can't be like, "Hey, dumb fuck. Have you
Yeah.
ever even thought about it a day in your life?" No,
Yeah.
like, because they're thinking about it every day.
Right.
And where they're at, that's a bad thing, and they're committing a sin every day, but they can't get the questions out of their mind, and they can't stop thinking about it, but they can't talk to anybody about it, right? And so I that's why I value Anthony's work and street epistemology in general so much, because all it does is it just plants that little seed by being like,
Yes.
okay, why?
Yeah.
And then makes that person think about it. And I don't know if maybe this was your experience, but that those people he talks to think about that so much longer than the interview even lasts,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, and so I'm so glad that you talked about the specific definition of street epistemology, because as somebody who had a full ride college scholarship on debating people about their salvation and their soul and their belief in God, that's just not it's not an okay thing to do if your goal is to truly open their eyes to the
Yes.
alternative options that are out there.
Yes, and I'm glad that you said open their eyes to it and not necessarily change their mind either, because I think I sometimes say the goal is to change minds, but what I mean when I say that, I don't mean convince you of the thing that I think is true. It's more just like like you said, consider the possibilities, right? Because like that's important. I believe everybody should be able to do that, but
Mhm.
no, you're absolutely right. It's something that this sort of principle of making it a safe space, honestly, a safe space for people to explore their beliefs
Yep.
is so important, because there is this kind of toxic debate culture online that wants to say, "No, you're wrong, you're dumb, and you're stupid." And one of the criticisms I get sometimes is that I'm too nice to people on calls. They really want me to be more contentious with folks, and I get that. I'm not gonna lie and be like and be this Mr. Rogers type and say, "Oh, I don't find that entertaining." Of course, I find some of that entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody does every once in a while,
Oh, yeah.
but but is that gonna be good for that
No.
person? No, it's gonna be good
No.
for you maybe as a viewer, but, like, that's a real human being that I talk to every
Right.
single time.
Right.
And, um, would a counselor talk to their client like that? Would anybody else talk the way that no, of course not. Like, in any other interaction in my life, this is an inappropriate way to talk. Why should it
Yes.
why because we're anonymous on the internet, that means I can be an asshole to you? Like, no,
Right.
I wanna meet people where they're at, and they called to me, by the way. They took the time out of their day, and they thought that they could have a conversation with me. I want to be able to let them have that.
Yeah.
And sometimes people call in and they wanna fight, okay? So it's like, I get the vibe, and, there's a little bit of back and forth there, but,
Yeah.
like, like 80, 90% of the people that really call in, maybe even more than that, really just wanna hear my perspective or a guest perspective and kind of have that exploration, and that's been a really great thing,
Right.
obviously, street epistemology inspired, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
And to me, it's like, if you have decided to take that debate argumentative approach
Mhm.
where you're like, and this and this and this, and you're just all, vitriol, how are you any different than a megachurch pastor?
Yeah.
How are you
Yeah.
treating that person any differently than the person talking to them the same way, but slamming a Bible on the
Yeah.
counter, yelling about God and damnation and this and feelings and belief and, the
Yeah.
spirit? And like, to me, that is literally the same thing. You're just victimizing the person in a different way.
I
You're
agree.
taking advantage of their vulnerability in a totally different way.
That's a great perspective. Yeah, and that's not that's I don't think that's ever to say there's not a time and a place to be mad. There's not
Yeah.
a time and a place to express,
Yeah.
I'm really bad about this when people, like, make really homophobic or
Yes.
transphobic remarks on the show. I feel like that's the hardest for me to keep my cool.
Well,
One,
and if
because
they start it, that's way
Ye
different.
yeah, and sometimes, obviously my guests, are LGBT or whatever, and it's
Yeah.
just like I feel a need to, like, really wanna instigate there a bit, like, escalate is what I mean, not
Yeah.
instigate, 'cause I'm not starting it, but it's just like, at the same time, I was homophobic too, I really have to remember that, and I was transphobic. I may not have, had picket signs or anything, but I was a part of this culture that said, yeah, being gay was wrong. And if somebody asked me if I thought being gay was right or wrong, I mean, I would tell you that. And that's the reality of a lot of Christians is that
Love the
they do
sinner, hate the sin.
love the sin exactly, is that they may not be super outwardly, um, homophobic and saying these people's spaces, but but in their private lives, that's how they feel, and that is what dictates how they treat people and how
Right.
they live their lives, and so, yeah, it's gruesome to see that, but I also have to remember that's a part of the deconstruction process too, and I have to let that take its course, and
Yes.
sometimes that means just, like, addressing it, but, like, letting having them let they gotta figure that out themselves.
Right.
I can't make them say, "Hey, you gotta." I will tell them, "Hey, I think you need to change your mind about this," but
Yeah.
they have to change their mind. I can't do that
Right.
for them, you know?
Right.
It's and that's tough. That's so tough.
Yes, yes,
Um, but
and I am
yeah.
grateful to this day, I am so grateful, and I've said it before, for the people who, when I went to college, were so patient with me and
Mm,
did that exact thing for me. So, like,
yeah.
I was never, like, racist, I don't remember ever being homophobic, but
Mm,
just, like, some of the things that I would just state as fact, some of the
mm,
hills I would die on, some of the
mm,
jokes that I thought were so funny,
yeah.
because I had already started comedy at that point, like, what a mistake giving a teenager a microphone and putting it on YouTube, like,
Oh,
Jesus
no.
Christ. Yeah,
Yeah.
but, I read my old t so I have Time Hop, I have that Time Hop app so that I can purposely, like, go back and delete all my old stuff as it, like, shows up in my memories as,
Well,
"Oh,
that's
10
good.
years ago
That's
today
good
you."
because I was gonna say I wouldn't go back to things I posted a year ago.
Oh,
I
no,
don't know
I do it religiously because I know that people, like, if I ever
Sure.
reach the level I wanna reach, they'll try to
You
cancel
know,
me,
they're
and I'll
gonna
be like,
try to yeah, they're gonna find some screenshots. Yeah, I know
yeah, and you're
exactly
like,
what you mean.
"I have already talked about it, thank you. I've
Yeah,
already
yeah, yeah.
addressed it." But I remember, like, for example, one of the ones that stand out to me the most was when that celebrity, like, nude scandal hacking happened and, like, all those female celebrities, their nudes got released.
Oh,
It
yeah,
was
the
like,
fappening.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I
yeah.
remember saying, like, "Well, duh, they took naked pictures of themselves. Like, if you don't want naked pictures of yourself
Mm,
seen by the internet, don't take them." And girls were like,
mm.
"Excuse you? I'm sorry. So, because they decided to take pictures on their private cell phone, the world deserves to see their body? Like, what
Yeah,
kind of attitude is that?" And they were like, "Okay, so
yeah.
can we see your pictures? What's in your camera roll right now?" And, like, even though I didn't have
Mm.
any, like, bad stuff, I knew I had, like, screenshots and stuff, so I was like, like,
Sure, sure,
yeah.
sure.
And they were just like, they were cool about it. Or, like, one day I was on a debate tournament and, one of I made some joke about, BDSM, and I
Mm,
said, "Oh, like, that guy's probably into BDSM, he probably has, like, all these victims, like, tied up in his basement," or something like that, and one of my friends who I now know was very much into the BDSM community, but she was closeted about it, like, she was quiet about it, she goes, "Actually, did you know that the entire thing behind BDSM is consent?" And I was
mm,
like, "Oh," and
mm.
she's like, "Yeah. So actually, like, not trying to, like, kill your joke or anything, but if somebody's into BDSM, all the people tied up in the basement really wanted that and consented to it. So if
Wow,
they're a creep or, like, a serial killer, they're probably actually, ostracized from the BDSM community." And I was like,
wow,
"Oh." Yeah, just stuff like that where, like,
wow.
I look back and I'm like, "What a you're such a dumb fucking bitch." But, like, people were so patient and kind and, like, just enough people being like, "So why do you think that exactly?" And I was one of those who would be like, well, I gotta get back to work. I don't have time to have this conversation." Like those people who are
Yeah,
losing
mm.
arguments and they're like, "Well, I have a job, so I gotta go."
Yeah,
But just enough people showing me, not telling me that I had no idea what the fuck I was talking about was enough to be like, wow, maybe I am kind of an ass,
mm,
actually. Like,
mm.
because so many people, I went to college in Southeast Arkansas, so many people agreed with what I said and were like, "Yeah, you're a slut if you take naked pictures of yourself, dumb bitch. Like, if you don't want that, like, blah, blah, blah." That I like, and people would say certain things that I said were really funny, and, like, certain impersonations I would do were encouraged, and I'm not blaming
Yeah,
anybody for why I was the way I was. It was easy to stay that way in that
yeah,
environment, and
yeah,
all it took was a few people being like, "So and so may not like you using, like, that word," or, like, "Have you ever thought about maybe just, like, not saying that about people?" Or, "Is that really how you think? Like, why would you think that?" And just making me question very much like street epistemology, why it is
yeah.
that I got to that conclusion, and the majority of the time it was because I heard it from someone at some point and, like, decided that that was my whole personality and identity.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I wonder all the time, like, who would I be if I had not met those 3 people
yeah,
who posed those questions unrelentingly. Like, they stayed by me for years and just checked me and checked me and checked me. If they'd
yeah,
heard me say one ignorant thing and been like, "Oh, what a dumb bitch, like, I don't want anything to do with her," 1, would not have blamed him. But
yeah.
2, I wonder all the time. I fear and I worry all the time about who I would have been if I had been just allowed to stay steeped in that ignorance, because it's so much easier to just block somebody on Facebook who thinks
Sure,
those things than to
sure.
actually have a conversation with them.
Yeah, yeah, and, like, I wonder that for myself too, as far as, like, what would I have been if I didn't go to college? Because a lot of my deconstruction happened when I was in college, and
Yes,
college kinda naturally opens you up to new people, new
it does.
experiences, new culture, new ideas, and so, that's a privilege, on my part that I was even able to experience that, and
Yeah,
I don't know what kind of person I would be without that experience. I also like, you bring up some excellent things. I think it's good to, like, I always try to remind myself too, like, it's also talking about privilege. It is a privilege that I get to be a straight cis white guy on the internet, and so, like, I can have the patience to deal with ignorance
yeah,
because, 1, I've trained myself to do it. It's an art form for me, okay, because
yeah,
I've just done this so much, but also it's
yeah,
just like, I don't necessarily begrudge people who wanna block people for saying ignorant stuff
right,
or can't handle
right.
that for themselves. It's more like, I can do that, so, like, I'm gonna
Yes,
pursue that.
exactly.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, 'cause
Yes,
I know where that can lead, and it
yes.
doesn't always lead to where you want it to, but, like,
No,
I have seen my mind's been changed on things. I've seen it change in others.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's nothing there's, there has nothing been very few things in my life have been as powerful as somebody telling me, "Because of something that you said, I've changed my mind on this." And I've
yes,
and I've gotten that a few times, and it's like, "Wow, that's
yes,
incredible. That's amazing.
absolutely.
That's why I do what I do, so that you can reflect, you know?" So,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
would much rather be the person that maybe they don't agree with, but they know they can talk to me about questions they have. Like, there are several people I've met
Mm,
through the podcast or were listeners of the podcast reached out to me who we agree to disagree, but
mm,
whenever they have a question that they think is like a gotcha or like unanswerable or whatever, I'm like the person that they message and they're like, "Hey, what are your thoughts on this?" And to me, that is
mm,
invaluable. But
mm.
also, I think as the people that we were versus the people that we are, do you ever feel like it's almost a chance to give back? Like,
Yes.
I I love so much who I am today, and I literally lay awake at night sometimes fearing who I could have been if I had not run into the people that I ran into or had the opportunities or moved where I lived. Very much in the same way that, like, I enjoy teaching stand-up because taking a stand-up class had such an impact on my life that, like, it changed the course of who I am. I feel the same way about atheism and agnosticism. Like, I'm so grateful to no longer be in that mindset that I was in beforehand, that I almost feel like it seems like you have a similar thing where you almost get, like, giddy at the opportunity to introduce somebody to the thought process and the
Yes.
ideas behind it. Whether or not they decide to do that is totally on them, kinda like we were
Yeah.
talking about, like, it's a thing only they can do, like, 1 hour with me is not gonna be the moment that they do it, very likely, but
Yeah.
you almost get to share. It's like when you find a great show on Netflix, you're like, "Oh, I wanna really talk to you about this, to see
Yeah.
your thoughts and to answer your questions. I would love to be your point of contact for this," and then just kind of watching where they go from
Right.
there.
Right. No, absolutely, because, it was such a big part of my life, this Christianity thing. I mean, it really
Yes.
was part of my identity. I feel like there's some people, and you've probably experienced this too, where you talk to them about this stuff, or you feel kind of embarrassed about this stuff because, there's cringy people online that are not the best representatives of what
Yes.
the kind of ideas that we're interested
Yes.
in. Um, and there's other people who have never grown up with this thing, and they don't get what the big deal is.
They
They're
don't
kind of like,
understand.
it's kinda like that. It's like, "Why do you spend your time talking about this stuff so much? And you're not even a Christian anymore, so, like, what's the big deal?" It's like, well, I mean, that was me. Like, 1, that
Yes.
was me, and that's millions of people right now
Yes.
who I have an intimate connection with, that I can use certain languages and phrases and invoke certain emotions and feelings and experiences that is a kind of code phrase that other people just won't ever have because they didn't grow up with that. And I
Yes.
get how that's hard to understand, but it really was so impactful to everything that I did, and now that that's different, now that that's changed, I'd like to give other people the opportunity to say,
Yes.
"Hey, this could be a thing that you should change," right?
100%.
Maybe sometimes you should,
100%.
maybe sometimes you shouldn't. Depends on the thing. But point is, you gotta, as we talked about before, you gotta be able to reflect on this, and I didn't have the means to do that. I didn't have the
Right.
tool, and I'm glad I can give that to people, and I also just,
Right.
like, talk about and read about this stuff. So it's like, I love giving people this info, like, here's the years of things I've been talking about
Yeah.
that I'll condense to you in a 5-minute package so that you
Yeah.
can not waste as much time as I have,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Yeah,
what you were talking about people who don't know, they don't understand the
yeah,
experience firsthand, it's so important too because, like, I have a lot of guests who cancel at
mm,
the last minute because they get cold feet, maybe they're not,
mm,
like, ready to talk, depending
sure.
on where I find them, it's typically people that submit to my guest form from, like, social media and stuff, and I was talking to a friend who did not grow up religious at all, and they were like, "Oh, like, don't you have that thing you gotta go to tonight?" And I was like, "Oh, not anymore, they canceled." And he was like, "They canceled? Like, don't you get tired of that shit? Like, people cancel on you at the last second? Like, that's really rude." And
Yeah,
I was like, "But here's the thing, like, we are talking about their
yep,
salvation."
yeah,
I was like,
it's true.
"We are talking about." I said, "To you, it's like, oh, you had a guest that decided not to be a guest tonight." To them, it's they probably had a mild or not mild absolute panic attack because they're still questioning whether or not God exists, and if God does exist, doing this podcast could very well send them to hell if they talk at all. Because
Yes,
Jesus said, "If you deny my
or
name,
their
I'll deny
friends
you at the
could see it,
gates."
or their parents could see it, or somebody they love, and that's a big deal too, talking
Yes.
about your doubts, because it's
Yes.
not encouraged for the
Right.
most part, you
Right.
know?
100%. Like,
Yeah,
and so I said, "It doesn't bother me at all because I'm glad that they got to the step where they applied on the form." Right?
yeah,
Like, that's a step further, but, like, some people are in danger if they talk about this stuff. Some people
right,
lose their monetary, financial stability because their parents aren't gonna help them in college anymore. Like,
yes,
so
and
yeah,
I'll
I
give
mean,
you a little tip here for folks who wanna talk about this stuff. People who have been on Sydney's show, I'll tell you, a lot of them are not using their real names. I don't know if you know this, my birth certificate doesn't say Objectively Dan,
what the
okay? It's not.
fuck?
And there's like, people who, and so I know what one guy, I won't say who, obviously, who who did a video revealing his real identity, and that wasn't his real identity. And, like, he like, to throw people off, which is
Really?
great. Yes, it's awesome. But,
That
like,
is awesome.
but, like, you ask people, like, "Why do you do that? Are you trying to hide secrets?" "Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I don't get shot." But also, like, that's a big deal for people to even
Yeah,
just come out and talk about it even anonymously, it's a big deal.
right.
I have
Well,
people who call into the show who, obviously, I suggest they don't use their real names, but it's like, this is the first time they've ever talked about it ever, and they're deciding to do this in a
yes.
public forum, like, that's because they can't talk about it with anybody they
Right?
know, you know?
Right,
It's
right,
yeah.
and what's even worse almost is,
Mm,
not everybody comes from a background where they're gonna get, like, flogged with sticks and stones if people find out, but their grandmother is
yeah,
going to lose respect for them,
right,
and
mhm,
their aunt is going to look at them with disappointment, so, like, sometimes it's not even, "Oh, if I come out as atheist, I'm gonna die." It's like, I'm literally just going to disappoint anyone who ever cared about me, and that's worse than death for some people,
mm,
you know?
mm, yeah,
Like
yeah,
like, there are some
it really
relatives
did
that I
feel that way.
Right, right.
You
Well,
know?
and there
Doesn't
are
feel that
some
way anymore, but
relatives.
it did feel that way for me. Yeah,
Right, and,
yeah,
there are some people in my life that I know for a fact don't listen to my podcast because they still
sure.
talk to me on a regular basis, and I know that if they did, they would not speak to me anymore, and
Yeah,
so
it
anytime they
changed your
like a
relationship with
post, I
them.
know they didn't listen to it because 1, my view count doesn't
Mm.
go up, but 2, I know for a fact they wouldn't talk to me anymore if they
Yeah,
listened to it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
it's true.
then, have you ever done psychedelics?
I did DMT one time, well, twice. Well, yeah, twice,
How do you forget how many
and
times you've done DMT?
because it was in the same day,
Oh, shit.
and it wasn't a lot, that's why. I
Oh,
tried
that's
to
good.
do it, and no, actually, it wasn't the same, it was, like, around the same week or so, I knew this girl.
You're like, listen. So
Listen,
was that before you started
no,
deconstructing or after?
this was like, a few years ago. I was
This is
already
actually why you couldn't do the podcast last week because you were on
no,
DMT.
no, I did have COVID last week. I did not here's the thing, I've only ever done this is so it sounds so weird. I've only ever, done marijuana and DMT. So
That's
so
such a
that's isn't
that's
that
like
weird?
two ends of the
Who
spectrum.
I know. Because I knew this girl and she's crazy and she, like, was really into drugs and stuff, and I was, like, going through some hard stuff. I had just broken up with somebody, and she was like, "I think you should do some DMT to, like, open yourself up," and I was like, "You know what? Fuck it. I guess I gotta do this once in my life." So
I mean,
I
did
tried
it
it.
did it help?
I didn't get a whole lot out of it, I'll be honest. I think aliens were trying to examine me on a spaceship, and, like, it was just kind of a weird experience. I didn't really get anything much out of it. It was just kinda like, "Oh, this is interesting, I guess." You know? I did think I
Yeah.
was talking to God one time when I ate too many edibles, but, like, that was, like, a very conscious, like, I know I'm not talking to God, but it kind of feels like I'm talking to God kind
And
of
oh,
moment,
and was
so
that before or after deconstruction?
that was also after.
Weird. Did
So
you, like,
I did
regret
not smoke
deconstructing
I
for,
did
like, a
not
second?
smoke at all until after I was kind of figuring myself out. I didn't drink either, by the way. I did not drink alcohol really I did not have, like, a full drink until I was, like, 22 years old, I think.
Was that, like, a religious
Um,
thing or
no, I just was like, I don't know, I never got into it, I guess. It was kinda religious, I guess, like, but, like, I don't know, I kinda just felt like I wanted to avoid it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So
And speaking of which, you are vegan? Did I read that
I am,
correctly?
yeah, mhm.
And I read where you had talked about how being vegan, like, identifying as vegan is almost more difficult than identifying as being an atheist or
Yeah,
being agnostic because, like, people are so much more judgmental about that.
they really are. Be when I kind of figured out that this was an identity I wanted to pursue, I first of all, I was doing the whole vegan thing for about 6 months before I told the public at large about it, because I wanna
Okay.
make sure I was really sticking with it, but also, like,
Yep.
um I know people who are other atheist content creators who really don't like vegans. So it's like, I'm the only vegan at the atheist community of Austin, and, there's people that call in, and other hosts have talked shit about vegans too, and it's like, "Oh, now you're talking shit about me." It's not just a hypothetical person anymore.
Right.
But yeah, that's a decision that I felt, and I'm not perfect about it by any means, but, like, it's something that I just feel is the right thing to do, and when you talk about that, that also becomes it's kind of like the atheism thing where it's like you're thinking about things that maybe you don't wanna think about, maybe you're scary to think about, or maybe you feel like you'll be judged if you think about. And I've definitely been super judged hardcore, about the vegan stuff, and that's not fun.
Was
Um,
it for, like, environmental, for, like, the animals, for personal
it
health?
was
Like, what was your
I think
main
it was for ethical reasons. You know, I'll be honest, vegans, to in my mind so here's the thing, right? Because like, there are definitely atheists that have some out there beliefs, but I feel like that's less common. With vegans, there's definitely more vegans with weird out there beliefs, especially when it comes to health stuff. They
Yeah.
believe in a lot of woo and crap about like, "Oh, veganism will cure your cancer," and stuff, like, that's just bullshit.
Right.
I don't really do it for that. I just couldn't, really justify the if I could avoid the purchase of animal products and actually put that money towards vegan products, that's the other thing people don't talk about. It's not just taking away, purchasing power towards these animal products, it's supporting local businesses. There's a lot of vegan businesses that closed in Austin this past year because they couldn't make it. It's like, wow, if more people gave them their money, these are local people here, like,
Yeah.
that actually does make a difference. So,
Yeah.
you are making a difference when you do that, but also just like, if you present this like oh man, we can really go into this. But basically, I mean, like, to make a long story short, gosh, no, it really has to be a long story. I mean,
Go for it.
I well, I won't get too much into it, but I had people that called in and talked about veganism, and I don't feel like I had a very good answer to it because if I want to if human beings are animals and we have interests and animals have interests. What's the difference there? Well, some people say, well, it's intelligence, right? But babies aren't intelligent. We
Right.
consider their interests all the time.
We consider their
Okay, look,
interests more than we
what about
consider live women's
listen,
interests.
we treat dogs better than we treat people sometimes. And what's the deal with that? Is a pig more cognitively functional than a dog? Actually, not really. I mean, like, there are some things that pigs have been in movies. I don't know if you've know this. You ever seen, uh, like, Babe, right? Like, all that,
Yeah.
like, Wilbur and stuff like they use, like, real pigs in those movies because, like, you can train a pig to do all kinds of stuff. So it's like, I think about Jeremy Bentham's quote, which is this idea of, like, "Ask not if an animal can speak, nor if they can think, but if they can suffer," right? And so, suffering is, as I understand it, is an evolutionary capacity that we have because we want to have self-preservation. So we get hurt and we want to avoid that pain, and that pain helps us avoid us dismembering our limbs, stuff like that. All mammals have this. All mammals pretty much have this. There's with almost without exception. I wouldn't know any exception. If you're a mammal, you have a nervous system, probably, and you have this thing, you have the systems that inform your pain. So, animals suffer.
Yeah.
So, and if you ask people, well, if you could have anim a burger that didn't come from a cow at all, exactly the same. I'm not talking about vegan burgers. I'm talking about chemically the same, and you got to choose between one that you had to kill a cow for, and one where it just came from maybe plant-based sources, but I'm talking chemically the same. You can't tell the difference. Which one would you choose? And purchasing power is the same too, right? Let's say they both cost the same. Anybody I know would say, "Oh, yeah, well, you want the one without the cow," because you recognize there's suffering there, right?
Right.
So, there's some dissonance then, because how do you reconcile that? And if I knew vegans, and I did, I knew people who could live without animal products, why couldn't I? What was stopping me? And I realized it's just because selfish reasons. It's because I like the taste of meat, and I will eat meat on occasion, I still do, and I still will purchase animal products on occasion because I still like it, but it's like I'm trying not to do that because I understand those products come with a cost, and it's not
Right.
just the monetary cost.
Right.
It is suffering, and of course, we can go a whole thing into how those products come to be. But yeah, like I said, I can't make it short. There's just so much to talk about with that specific issue and why I feel the way I do about it, 'cause, it's very complex. It's just like atheism. It's multidisciplinary. There's
Right.
a lot of things you gotta look into with it, but anyway, so
Yeah.
that's a tangent there. So
Do
sorry about
you,
that.
no, you're good. You're good. I
Yeah,
asked. Do you have any
yeah,
pets?
I do. We just adopted a cat together.
Oh, nice.
His name is Felix Navidad. He's a cat, and he hates the world. He's hiding behind the futon right now. He's a little traumatized. And then, we also have another black cat named Willow. So,
Nice.
and
Yeah.
they do eat meat, by the way.
Well,
That's
not only that, but, like, I
yeah.
feel like people who have pets
Yeah.
maybe understand that idea a little bit more.
Mhm, mhm.
Like, I don't feel like people who don't have pets get a chance to see, like, the intelligence behind animal
Yeah,
behaviors.
yeah.
And like you said, even if it's just like a dumb animal, even if it's just like a dumb piece of shit, like, why would
Yeah,
if it
yeah.
can suffer, right?
Right,
But,
right, right, right.
so we adopted parrots recently,
Yeah,
and I have never met a more intelligent animal in my life.
sure,
And
sure.
I've had a dog for years, and I thought
Yeah.
I had the smartest dog on earth. I had no idea that parrots were so intelligent. And
Mhm.
once you see those, like, humanoid emotions in animals and those intelligent thoughts and those intelligent behaviors, not like, "Oh, it can put the block where the block goes, yay,"
Yeah, yeah.
like, not even trained stuff. It really changes how you feel about things like, where does my
Yes.
chicken come from? Where does my beef come from? Where does my pork come from?
Mhm.
Um, and it's just wild. And so it's tough to and I know some of the more extreme vegans say like, well, owning a pet is just as bad because that's like
Yeah.
slavery.
There's a lot of, debates on that too, which is interesting. Yeah, that's another thing too, because people often ask like, "Well, when does it stop?" Because you can do a lot of these things, and
Yeah.
I don't know when it stops. I mean, I feel the same way about recycling. It's like, yeah, we should probably recycle because like, that's an easy thing to do.
Right.
Like, that's why you should do it. I understand vegan is a little bit harder than recycling for the most part, but it's like,
Honestly, though,
there's
it's
ways you
easier
can
and easier.
yeah, it's easier now than it ever,
Right.
well, it's not I'm not gonna say ever has been because there have been societies of entire people that have been vegetarian and vegan, specifically in the Indian subcontinent and other places, right? So, like, we got nothing on them. But, like, in terms of United States of
Like
America, yeah, like,
Western, yeah.
yeah, we can do it, okay? There's
Yeah.
people who've been vegans for before the internet was a thing, okay? Like, you can do it too. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
if you really wanna do it, you can make efforts to do it. But it is effort. I feel like that's another thing too. Yeah, it does take some adjusting. You gotta work with that, so,
Yeah. And so
um,
in terms of the biggest change
yeah.
on your entire life, would you say deconstructing? Would you say going vegan? Would you say something else like starting on YouTube and starting podcasts? What would you say has had the biggest, most impactful, like positive impact on your life of all those changes?
So I would say, I've been doing the atheism thing for a lot longer, and that I got involved suddenly, I was watching these people on YouTube who are now all my friends. I know all these
Isn't that
people,
wild?
and it's a
Yeah.
great thing, and they know me. I'm not just like, I'm not their patron supporter. So they and
Right.
shout outs to everybody who donates a Patreon. Obviously, I mean, you rock for supporting content creators, but like I have dinner with these people
Yeah.
sometimes when we're in town together or something, right? And it's like there is a real sense of community that I've gotten from doing this that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And I'm able to give that sense of community to other people. And I it's a parasocial relationship. I don't always get to see the faces of people, but I read people's comments and
Yeah.
I see what people have to say, and I always know that there's somebody that will never has been watching me for years and has yet to comment and probably never will, but they're still listening too, and they still get something out of it, and that makes me feel like I'm doing my best to reach out because I'm not just talking to a village. I'm talking to people who live in other nations. Like
Yeah.
that's something that not a lot of people can say that they do, and that's a
Right.
really cool thing. I'm glad I can do it. Is it the most effective thing I can do? I think so. I think because I have the ability to do these things, I should keep doing it. Like, if you are really great with meeting people where they're at in the homeless shelters or in a homeless community, like, I think you're doing your absolute best by being there local in these places. I think I'm good at this internet thing, so I'm gonna keep doing the internet thing, right? So,
Yeah.
like, that's how Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is my, fulfilling my self identity, my self purpose
Yeah.
here, right? Is by doing this, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you almost feel like you found kind of like your tribe in a sense.
In a way,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
But I'm still changing, like, obviously I'm
Yeah,
vegan now, that's been only past few years I'm doing that, like, I'm still reinventing myself
yeah,
in ways. It doesn't mean that it's a static thing, doesn't mean I have to be this thing forever, and that's
right,
a freeing thing
right.
too.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think I almost feel like maybe it had more to do with my age, maybe it had more to do with my spot in life, but I feel
Yeah.
like that welcome of any change that comes. I feel like that didn't really start for me until deconstruction. I don't know about you, but I feel like
Mm.
so much of the fundamentals of the Christian, especially the Baptist church, is that tradition, 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 normal, normal, normal. You don't
Yeah.
rock the boat. You do
Yeah.
what everybody else has done. And even
Yeah.
like the cool hip ones, there's
Mm.
still like a status quo. And so you don't shave your head. You don't like do those things that people like, oh, we're not going to judge you for that because we're Christian. But like, why would you do that? Because you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, why would
Sure.
you?
Sure.
And so then once you drop that aspect, once you drop like the biggest, most important rule book there is, it's almost like there's not really any rules left,
Mm. Mm.
with the
Yeah.
exception of like
Yeah.
literal laws. But
Sure.
and I feel like that freedom, once you're able to be like, I don't think I believe in God. I don't even think heaven is a thing anymore. It's a lot easier to be like, maybe I'll go vegan. Like maybe I'll get a
Yes.
haircut.
You're
Maybe
absolutely
I'll
right.
live somewhere else. Yeah.
I give less of a shit about what other people think in general, which
Yeah.
is freeing in and of itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do become kind of more open to other modes of being. that are non-traditional in some
Yeah.
ways. People used to joke I look like I was Mormon. My beard has grown out a little bit now, and I have you can't see it, but I have an ear piercing. But like when I was first doing stuff on the internet, I just looked like your Mormon kid down the street, and
In
like
that video, you definitely did.
yeah, so it's like, and I'm not super alternative looking now, but it's like I'm glad even just the little things like my ear piercing, that's such a small thing, but to me, that's like I get it now. I didn't used to get why people got stuff like that, but I got one myself and I get it now, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
there's something freeing about that, and, yeah, you're right, it's like I don't have to live under fear of anybody's judgment except my own, and uh that doesn't mean I do wrong to people. I'm still doing whatever I want, and what I want is to do good for people, and, that's a good thing too, and I don't have to do it by the Christian idea of what good is. I think that's an important thing too. I didn't really know what good was, I turns out,
yeah,
in this deconstruction thing. My idea of good was way too simple. It was whatever I thought God wanted, but first of all, what does God want? That'll never be solved. But also, like, why is that good? Why
right,
is what God wants even meaningful to me
right.
or anybody else? And, turns out it's not. Turns out we're human beings, and again, we all have interests. I like Peter Singer's principle of universal consideration of interests. As long as you understand that, and that's really how ethics is created. Like,
Yeah,
it's, simple, but also complicated, and it will never be absolute, but, like, it's better than, like, saying, "Oh, well, we have to do what this book says because your mom liked the
right,
book, and your dad liked the book, and their
right,
parents liked the book." So,
right, and the book says that if you don't follow it, real bad shit'll happen, and we don't really
real
wanna
bad shit'll
find
happen
out.
to you. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
the loving
yeah,
God of all eternity will banish you to a place of eternal torment.
yeah.
So, no pressure, though.
Yeah, no pressure whatsoever, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I feel like your personal experiences, and I feel like a lot of what you've been talking about tonight is going to I hope that it really gives people something to think about. I really hope that very much like we were talking about street epistemology, I hope it gives people I never wanna scare people. I never
Mhm.
want to make people who might, like, be considering if Christianity is not for them I never ever want them to be afraid of what they've heard. I always want them to just consider it a different opinion and a different option. And I feel like
Mhm,
you're a
mhm.
good example of somebody who communicates in that way, somebody who's
Well,
like,
thank you.
"This is my experience. I'm not telling you you have to do it, but I highly recommend it if you wanna try it," right? Like, those kind of ideas. Because I have a lot of friends who are still religious who listen to the
Mm,
podcast, and
mm.
sometimes I can tell they get a little spooked
Yes.
when I talk to people.
We do make jokes, like, I just made a joke about, a loving God, eternally tormenting us, right? Like, that's not a joke I would've made 10 years ago.
Right.
In
Right.
fact, I would've scoffed at it. I said, "Oh, these atheists, they're always coming up with these crazy things." But yeah, you're
Right.
right, like, we're so used to that now in our stage in our life process that it's easy to forget how unfamiliar and how I don't wanna say challenging because I think that's a pretty common sentiment that people hear and that doesn't bother them, but more like, um, how, irreverent we are now, that's a bothersome thing, and it's not for lack of understanding, it's not for lack of study, at least for myself. I don't know about you, City, maybe you just were like, "Ah, fuck, I don't believe in this God shit anymore." For
I got
me,
a
this was a
whole bookshelf back there that's
yeah,
nothing but
this was this is an extra class I had to take in college, and it was called Figuring My Fucking Life Out,
Yeah.
and, that took up a lot of time. I didn't get credits for that, but,
Nope.
like, that was there and that was happening,
Yeah.
and, um, I can't tell you what grade I got because there was no professor for it, but I'll tell you this is where I'm at right now because of it, and that took time and you're gonna for me, listening to other people express their irreverence, that kind of opened me up a little bit too. I don't know
Yes.
about you, but
And
yeah.
and also asking questions that remain good questions.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
hearing a question on a podcast, not being able to answer it yourself in that moment while you're listening
Mm,
to it, thinking about it later that night, still not being able to answer it, and then
Yeah.
sometimes reaching out to me and being like, "Look, I don't understand. Like, what is this?" Like people
Yeah.
who they want their belief to answer that question and
Yes.
they can't find it. And
Yes.
that scares them more than finding like the wrong answer or something like
Mm.
that. Like just not being able to find an answer to that question anywhere that they can really rely on um,
Yes.
freaks a lot of people out.
Yes, because you've landed in this spot and you've planted yourself in this spot and your roots are still in the ground and you don't know any other way of living. And for some people, they realize that and they stay there
Yes.
because they're scared of what could happen if they try to uproot themselves. And I'll be honest, it's not always pretty at first.
No. No.
And some people uh, still deal with the issues that come with that. But
Yeah.
for many of us, there is a greener pasture
Yeah.
where I've been able to root myself and plant myself and grow, and I'm happy with the tree that I've become. Man, I'm taking this metaphor really far,
I
but
like
like
it.
it's true though, right? It's like I planted myself in a new place, and I've been planted there for a few years now, and it's great. It's wonderful. I can't promise you it's gonna be that wonderful, but I can promise you it'll be different, and that might be a good thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Different can
Yeah,
never be a bad thing. It
yeah,
might be something you don't wanna do again,
yeah,
but, like,
yeah.
I'm never ever gonna accidentally shave my head again on a
If
Thursday night,
he
but we
he
did it. We're
here's a
here.
perspective, that I think might be useful if you're listening to this and you're having thoughts. If Jesus is who he says he is, and he is the God of the universe, and he really loves you, and he wants what's best for you, I think he's okay with you trying to figure stuff out. I think he would want you to come to him through honest reflection than
Yes.
blind obedience. I mean,
Yes.
maybe you don't think that's true. I think a loving God would want that. Uh, I mean, if I had kids, I would want them to do what I asked them to do because they love me, not because they're afraid of me or
Right.
because they're afraid of what I could do to them. But
Exactly.
um, something to think
Exactly.
about, you know?
But
Yeah.
right, the true meaning of belief. Is
Yeah.
it belief or is it coercion?
Yeah.
Is it like,
True.
have you been exposed to other ideas and still at your core believe this? Or
Mm,
are you just comfortable believing that because
right.
you'll keep your friends, you'll keep your house, you'll keep your family, you'll keep
Yeah.
your current life, and you're too afraid of change and you're too afraid of what you don't know?
Yeah.
Is that true belief or is that something else?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Well,
Yeah.
Dan, this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to be
I agree.
respectful of your time. If you had anything to say to people who maybe they're not deconstructing yet, maybe they're thinking about it, maybe they're sitting in church every day and being like, this doesn't make any sense. Is that what you would say to them to kind of explore their what they truly believe? Or what would you say to somebody like that?
Well, if you're listening to this show, then you must be open to some ideas. But even if you think that we're just full of it, see what the people in your community have to say about some of the questions you've been thinking of. Uh, and if you're not afraid, you should ask them and see what they respond and see if they're convincing to you. If you found a new answer that's convincing for yourself, great. Try that answer out. See how that works with other people. See what they have to say. Call into my show. I'll tell you what I
I was
think
just about
about
to
that.
say, call into his show. Yeah.
But yeah, no, like it's a process. I'm not telling anybody to do anything except if you're listening, cool, then maybe you're thinking about stuff. If not, like, hey, I'm still here. You know what I mean? If you think I need to come back to Christ, that's a different conversation that you should have again on my show. But I'm not going back to Christ anytime soon, at least in my plans, and I'll tell you why. And it's because I'm really one happy where I'm at, but also I've gone through this journey, and I've seen some things. I've looked at some things. I've had conversations about things, and believe me, it was a struggle. But I'm here where I'm at, and uh, that struggle is something that is noble if you want it to if you really want to take it on. I would rather have gone through that struggle than have not because
Yes,
I'm more
absolutely.
honest. I'm more me than I've ever been, and that's because I chose to engage with that. And that's
Yes.
not something that everybody can do, honestly, because they are afraid of what might happen. So,
I love the way you phrase that because I feel the exact same way. Like, we
mm,
are the more us than we've
yeah,
ever been. And who knows what the future holds, but we're not afraid of it anymore. We're
yeah,
just here for the ride.
yes, yeah,
Absolutely. Well,
100%.
Dan, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being a member of the podcast, being a guest on the podcast. You're technically a member of the
Oh,
podcast now. There you go.
yeah, okay, I'll take
Um,
that.
and for anybody listening, I will link his street epistemology video below, as
Yes.
well as a link to. Oh wow, now she's like full on barking at her
Now
siblings.
I'm hearing that.
Yeah,
Hearing
she's
that,
like
so that's
running. As well as a link to your channel
yeah.
and subscribe.